Hey there, nomads of lore.
Maestros of mirth and mythology.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Jonathan.
And together we are Mead and Mischief, your home away from no home. In this video, we are going to be talking about Wheel of Time, Book 1, Eye of the World. This is going to be our review. This is the first review for this series. We have an introductory video that you have linked in the description. You can go check that out, talking about how we came to start reading these books. Into this video, we're going to have a short summary of this book. We're going to have a quick spoiler-free review, so you can watch the first part if you've never read this. And then we're going to wrap up with our spoiler-filled review at the end. So let's get started.
That's right. Awesome. So this is an epic high fantasy 14-book series. And let's see, what is a high fantasy?
So, there are two broad categories and everything in between of fantasy books. There's high fantasy and low fantasy. High fantasy is something like Lord of the Rings or, Lord of the Rings is a great thing where there is a new world being created. This does not take place in the world we live in. It's its own thing. A low fantasy would be something like Harry Potter, or even some of the earlier parts of Narnia, where it exists in our world, but with magic added onto it.
Awesome. So let's get started with the small summary, spoiler-free summary. We're going to try to keep it spoiler-free for you. So this book is based in a world where time is on a wheel, so events happen over and over and over. The magic system it has a male and female half. And the dark one, the enemy, the bad guy, has tainted the male half. So the females that use the magic, they're fine. They can use it. But any males that use the magic in this world become insane, basically. They go crazy. So that's not good. So in the prologue, we have a guy who's known as the Dragon. And he challenges the Dark One. And this fight basically brings on the breaking of the world. And then we shift over to where the story starts. That's after the prologue. But before that, there's a premonition or a prophecy that there will be a new dragon reborn who will be able to fight the Dark One. So
fast forward several years or reverse or whatever. I don't know. It's a wheel. We don't really know what's happening yet. But we end up in the Shire. I mean, the Two Rivers. It's intentionally supposed to invoke Tolkien. It's Tolkien. The first about 2/3 of this book or so are very, very similar to the Fellowship of the Ring. And we meet basically Frodo, Merry, and Pippin. I mean, Rand and Mat and Perrin. They're very similar characters, and they're farmers. A small, sleepy village. It's a place that you'd probably love to just go and hang out, and it seems like a great place to be. And then the strange things start happening. This interesting character, basically Gandalf, shows up, except a woman, and she's an Aes Sedai. We know nothing about that at this point. We don't really, actually, all through this book, we only learn so much about what the Aes Sedai are. And he basically comes like Gandalf and says, "Hey, you're destined for something." And they're like, "Oh, heck no, this is no good." And so then bad creatures start showing up, and more things happen.
Yeah, and so she kind of takes care of those bad creatures, or at least some of them, and tells the whole group that, hey, if you want your friends and family to live, you got to get out of here, and I'm going to go with you and keep you safe. And what they know of Aes Sedai, they're a little bit leery of her. They're not quite sure that she's on their side, and so they're kind of scared. But they're like, well, we don't want our friends and family to die, so we got to go. So they go out on this adventure. They meet lots of other people, and that's pretty much all we can tell you about without getting into too much detail. So
that's exactly right. So that's the summary, or at least the spoiler-free summary, about as much as we feel comfortable sharing with you spoiler-free. Right. So now we're going to give a still non-spoiler review portion. We're going to talk about a few of our favorite things and a few of our least favorite things, non-spoiler. So what's the first thing?
Awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit about the magic system. Magic system is really cool. I kind of explained a little bit earlier. There's a male and a female half. and it's super unique. Especially the fact that the male half is tainted, so anybody who is a male who does magic, everyone is terribly afraid of. They're already afraid of the Aes Sedai because they don't understand the magic. And so in this book, it doesn't delve too deep into what can be done with the magic, but there is a little bit.
So our second thing that we really liked about this book is the characters. They are very interesting characters. They're fun. They're likable. They're interesting. Nynaeve, the wisdom, is quite fun because she, at the beginning, she's grumpy at everything and is really hilarious. Honestly, probably the least interesting character in this first book, at least, is Rand. Honestly,
the main character.
but they're all very interesting, very very well fleshed out. That we meet several people along the way. The side characters are some of the most interesting folks in this first book. It's what kept me reading the whole time is the intriguing characters, intriguing things that are happening. So
Tom Marilyn.
Yeah, Tom Marilyn, super cool character, side character that's really neat. We learned a few things about him in here, and hopefully more to come.
Yeah. So the third thing we wanted to talk about was the ending. The pacing of this book, we'll talk about a little bit later, is a little bit slow in the beginning, but the ending is extremely awesome. It has a very large scene that happens, and I can't explain too much about that scene, but it is very lots goes on, lots of things go on in this scene, and it kind of is a culmination of all the things that you've been waiting on for the whole book. Like, when is something going to happen that this character, when is something going to happen in general, but when is something going to happen? This character has been leading this way for this whole time. When is this going to happen? It finally happens at the end. And so just don't stop halfway through the book. Just keep going, get there to the ending. So the last thing we wanted to talk about was...
So last thing is actually kind of our bridge between our pros and cons, essentially, because depending on what your preference is, it could be either way. And that is Robert Jordan's writing style, and specifically the amount of detail he puts into his descriptions. He is very, very detail heavy. You'll know everybody's eye color. You'll know what color dress they wear. Everything. And which some people will be a turnoff to some people because it's just a lot. I didn't find it particularly frustrating myself, but I know that can be a deal breaker or just a frustrating thing for some people. And so but it's a pro because it really elaborates and shows us the world and really allows you to really visualize what's going on. It's a con because it's just a lot of little details, minutia.
Yeah. All right, so this comes to the negative portion of our review for this book. These are the things that we just didn't quite like, and we of course already talked about one, and I've already talked about this one, but I'm going to reiterate the pacing of this book is just extremely slow to start out. It seems like forever that you kind of meet these characters and it kind of gets going, and then it's like nothing happens for. Literally, I think it's like 400. No, it's
500 some odd pages.
Yeah, it's like it's forever. It's a lot of pages. Nothing happens, but they're on a journey, and there is stuff that happens, but there's nothing,
intrigue.
That you really get to sink your teeth in until the end. The end is just it's awesome. And then, well, I don't want to talk about the second book yet. But the second book almost has the opposite problem. But we'll talk about that when we get there. So what else did we not like?
So the second thing was a negative, which I actually didn't notice as much when I was reading through, but then I was listening to the audio and listened to an interview at the end where Robert Jordan is talking about this book and kind of some of his motivations, which is a good little interview. But it made me think about something, go back and think about that is a negative in both our opinions, that I already talked about the details being a good thing or a bad thing, but the way he describes things, especially people in particular, and especially the women, is very repetitious. Basically, every woman in this book is his vision of the most beautiful woman ever, and it's very one note and he describes them all
the exact same way.
Yeah, the same way.
Yeah.
And so that's
and it's not only the women. He does that in a lot of things that he describes.
We've talked a lot about the cultures and things as well.
Yeah.
He describes, he's very detailed. A lot of his stuff is almost formulaic and very he describes it all the exact same way. The last thing we're talking about in our dislikes is the length. I mean, this book is almost 800 pages in this weirdly shaped paperback edition. And I don't mind that it's long. It just doesn't have to be that long.
Yeah.
So much of this book, nothing happens.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. It's worth reading. I know that sounds daunting, but there was enough interesting things that had me thinking that I didn't stop reading.
It's not that nothing happens in the sense that literally nothing happens. It's just that there's so little going on that has a bearing on what's on the actual story
and character development.
Anything. Mm-hmm. He throws in these tiny little flecks and little salt and peppers of these elements that you're like, wait, I want to know more about that. Of course, you don't get anything.
Right.
You just get this tiny little, description of one little thing, and then you're like, wait, where did that go? And of course, throughout the rest of the books, I think that a lot of those things get explained. Some of them do. Since I'm 7 books in, some of them do. Some of them still have not. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, yeah.
So this is the end right here of our spoiler-free portion. So if you have not read this book and you're even vaguely sort of kind of maybe someday in the future want to read it or want to watch the show coming out in a few months and don't want those things spoiled, you should stop right now.
Why are you still here?
Go away. The first thing we want to talk about in our spoiler-filled portion is a little small scene. It's really not a super exciting scene, but it was one of the first things that happened in the really, really long dry spell of kind of more boring part in the middle. It's this scene where they're out in the woods, and we've discovered Moiraine has helped Egwene to know that she can channel. She can use the one power. We only barely know even anything that means at this point, but Egwene, everybody else, Rand and Nynaeve and all these other characters, they're like, no, heck no, it's not going to happen. But Egwene, being the one standout, is she's kind of like, oh, cool.
She actually embraces it.
Yeah, she embraces. Oh yeah, that sounds really cool. Let's do it. Yeah. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna go to the White Tower and so Moraine's like, okay, well we usually wait to train people until they go to the White Tower and do all this stuff, but because of how old you are, we're gonna start training you now. And she kind of just barely starts to explain about the Aes Sedai and the White Tower, and is very intriguing at that point. Is one of the things that kind of kept me reading. There's also the kind of funny part where, Rand kind of accidentally starts overhearing and then he's just kind of listening behind a tree or whatever. And I think I'll have to go back and check to be sure. But I'm pretty sure at some point Moiraine is like, so we know you're there. You can just come out. It's fine. And which is a fun little part. So that's one of the first things that's interesting after kind of some of the opening excitement in the village that I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. So the second scene that we were wanting to talk about is a little bit later, and they go into a city that is now called Shadar Logoth. Mm-hmm. And it's a very interesting scene because there's she talks about the fact that the Trollocs and everybody who's chasing them, the dark people, the dark friends and all that, they're not going to want to follow them in there, which kind of is like very ominous because it's like, wait, if they don't want to follow us, what's here? And so they go in there and she puts up some wards and does some stuff. And of course the 3 boys can't help but just go off and get into trouble. Yeah. So they go down and they find this character. And I actually don't remember what he's called at the time
what
that
he says
introduced.
He's called.
Yeah. But his name is Mordeth. And they go down with him, and he says that he's a treasure hunter and that he needs some help getting the treasure out. I don't know why they believe him. It's beyond me, but they go down and they find it, and he's got a treasure room. He really does. Yep. And Moiraine had been very careful to tell them not to touch anything,
not take anything out,
not to take anything out. And of course, Matt can't help himself. He puts a dagger in his pocket. And that's a thing that happens for a long time. But anyway, that whole scene is just really cool. And there's eventually, the Trollocs decide that they need to pursue them, and the darkness comes, and the whole the fog rolls in, and everybody. This is kind of where everybody gets split up. Mm-hmm. Everybody kind of goes in a different direction, and that's what the rest of the book is kind of them on these different paths trying to get back together so that they can finish. And so that's a really cool scene.
So that was definitely cool. The beginning of the end is in Caemlyn, when they finally get to Caemlyn, and that's where there's a lot of different things that happen. They see Logain and whatever, but the one that we want to talk about specifically is when they meet the Ogier Loyal. He's a super fun character. Mm-hmm. He's basically their scholar puppy. He's an adorable character. I don't, it's kind of a girly way to describe, but he really is. He's just adorable. He's always, bashful and whatever. And he's afraid of offending people about stupid things that nobody would take offense to. But he moves
very slow. He's very treant-like.
Yes, very much like the Ents in Lord of the Rings. I think he even basically quotes Treebeard. Says "Don't be hasty," and all of that in there. So I definitely was thinking that as I read it. But his point in this story, other than just being an adorable character, is that he knows a lot about the ways, which when I heard about the ways and all of that was super fascinating to me. I love that. I hope we learn more about that as we continue along the way, because it was super fascinating. They go into the ways. It actually reminded me a lot of Star Wars Rebels, the world between the worlds, the way it described. That's what I was picturing in my head almost, except more, instead of neon sci-fi lights, more dim medieval lights. But it was super fascinating, and what the dark wind is and what's going on with that. Mm-hmm. And that was rather terrifying, to say the least. Mm-hmm. And so you being able to use the ways to transport and go save the Eye of the World, which Loyal also knows a lot about the fact that it's in danger, that's an odd thing. Yeah. It's not explained yet. I don't know whether that ever will be, but they go to the Eye of the World.
Yeah. And then that's the end scene, which is probably the best scene out of the book. Well, maybe not the best scene, but it's the climax. It's
most
the
exciting, for sure.
Most exciting, yeah. So they get to the Eye of the World, and there's the Green Man, and he kind of talks to him for a little bit about things, and then all of a sudden, out come two Forsaken bad guys. And then you get to see really what Rand can do. You still don't understand what he does.
He doesn't either.
He doesn't understand. That's exactly right. He doesn't even understand what goes on. But there's really cool that whole scene with him protecting everyone, and then the not understanding and the whole kind of blanking out all the things that happen in that really cool ending scene.
So that has been our spoiler-free and spoiler-filled review of Robert Jordan's Eye of the World.
So, as all YouTube videos, we would love for you to like if you like it, dislike if you don't like it. Please subscribe so you can get our content, ring the bell, all those things. Please comment down below about anything you like or dislike from this book if you haven't read it, or if you're excited about the TV series coming, whatever. We'd love to hear from you guys, love to have your input, and good luck. Have a great week. Be a mead or a mischief.
Be a mead or a mischief. I don't know what that means. Are you a mead? I don't know.
Be a nomad of lore, because that's important.
Because that's important.
It is.
Yeah.